Right, let's get started then. So, what I thought we'd do is look back on the readings for summer, or I guess summer plus plus, since we kind of extended it a bit, and then talk a little bit about what sorts of things we want to put on the agenda for the next few months. So, yeah, why don't we start at the top today with Anuraj?
Okay. Um, the interesting papers, the readings which we did, I found the time clocks and the ordering of events. That was an interesting read. Uh, like I'm still not able to appreciate the brilliance in it, but like it still feels a little trivial to me. But that was an interesting read, and then I spent some time digging into it, and then I found a video with Leslie Lamport saying that he was able to do it because he had a background in physics. So that was like some interesting bunny trail I went on. And the other interesting paper was, I think, shared by Vinay. That the group is its own worst enemy. So that was also an interesting read for us. That I found that like how do you scale social software when the number of people increases? That is also something I found really interesting. Yeah, those were my thoughts. Next is Ben.
Yeah, I enjoyed a lot of the going into the distributed systems papers. It was nice to be able to sit down and actually put the time to read those, understand them. Um, that was enjoyable. So I think that was probably my favorite part. Um, as for the coming week or so, or next quarter, I guess, I was we were talking. I was talking to Jenna earlier. I think when we mentioned this about trying to maybe get other people in. There was a bunch of projects we put in the forum on Discord, and we would have like talks with them. I'm not sure what we would intersperse those if with um, we could do. I mean, I would be happy doing more like the deep dives into various topics. Um, but we could do other things as well. I think I'll move on. I think it's David Babbitt next, and unless you want to skip to group org.
Uh, I could pass. Is that all right? I'm not sure who to pass it on to though.
Yeah. Just then it's Grigori if you're available.
Uh, I generally enjoyed the readings, most of them at least. The most enjoyable, from my point of view, was a discussion about junk space and the Herbert Simon uh, uh, article. I also agree with Anuraj that the series of articles started with Lamport were kind of important and interesting to get back to. Uh, so, in my view, this trend should be continued. But in my opinion, at least personally, uh, I need a little bit more time to read a real scientific article than just 10 or 15 minutes that we usually spend reading stuff here. So probably we need to develop a little bit different protocol for reading real scientific articles. For me, 15 minutes doesn't make it. And I will pass it on to Maya.
Thank you. It's really difficult for me to choose any particular article. What I really feel like is I woke up one morning and, started following the articles and reading them whenever I read them, whether or not I actually participate in the call and also articles mentioned in the notes. And then I wake up a year later and I'm somewhere else. And it's difficult to point at any particular articles that made the jump. And when I'm asked, to look back, it's difficult for me to even point at the articles that I've read. So what I'm thinking is that even more so than a prompt score, we should somehow classify these articles in a way, which I can't imagine what it is, in order to allow other people to go on these journeys. I'm sorry I can't, point at any specific article, but I wouldn't say it's all a blur because I can see that I've learned a lot, but I can't point at any particular one as being the one. So I'm passing it on to Nathan.
Thanks. I mean, I think it's looking back through the article list. I think it makes it hard for me to pick out good favorites because I realize how many of the sessions this last season I missed. I think of the ones that I did manage to catch. I've kind of enjoyed on two different prongs. One has been the more technical papers. So again, Echo, Anraj, Grigori, and single out the Lamport papers is really, really interesting. But then also, I really liked the discussion that Vinay led. I think some of those social issues and the question of how emerging distributed technologies slot in to society, how things might change, and just being a little more purposeful in the thinking there about what's the right form of these things are things I find very interesting. Um, in terms of moving forward, again, I think you should take my opinions with a grain of salt, just because I've been a little bit less engaged. Um, well, I am personally inclined to want to do more technical papers. I have the same problem that Gory mentioned, where I just have a real hard time finishing the papers. I think I just need to get started a little bit sooner, and I wonder if that maybe means we need to do a little bit more pre-planning, or maybe I just need to be more engaged with the pre-planning. Maybe it's there, and I'm just not seeing it about what we're reading, um, just to get a little bit better participation. I like Mayor's idea about classifying things, and I think that might be a useful exercise to do at the end of this next season, or maybe while it's going on. It's like just have a short thing during the discussion about, like, what are the tags or something that we would put, or if we were thinking of like sequences of papers that somebody could read, where would we slot this in a particular sequence? Might be interesting, an interesting structural way to approach um, this moving forward. I think Shrita's next, but it looks like Shrita's on listening mode, so I guess on to Venkat.
All right. So I'm just recalling how we ended the previous season. If you remember, we were doing through spring really heavy into like hands-on blockchain stuff. We were experimenting with a lot of stuff and exploring like blockchain specific hands-on topics. And there was a deliberate interest in broadening the scope to distributed systems, which is what we ended up doing. And as I recall, I don't recall the specifics, but I think there was some sentiment in favor of like mixing up technical and social aspects of distributed systems. And we were also like trying to like keep a relatively clean separation with online governance. So I think the way I was at least trying to like find things that fit into that definition was picking up on social things that kind of had more of a technical flavor. And I think that was hard, but to the extent we managed to find social readings at all, it did kind of work. I'm looking back on the list, and it looks like it has been dominated by more technical readings, but there were a few social readings. Like yes, like Grigory mentioned, the junk space and Simon article pairing. That was, I think, a highlight of the less technical readings, and it was not. I felt it did not fall naturally into the online governance readings either. So there is kind of like a space in between the two. So that was kind of interesting. Um Same thing with the quadratic payments and quadratic voting type stuff. Uh, let's see. I personally really like the last reading that I picked, which was the Eto principle, the efficiency thoroughness trade off. Like, I know some of you thought it was like somehow extremely obvious, but it's one of the super obvious things that I thought actually nobody ever points out. And once it's pointed out, making it explicit is like really valuable. And it also fits in that gap between technical and social in an interesting way. Let's see. Yeah, in terms of like adding structure, I don't know if there's enough like detailed structure to tag, but I think we could do something like a narrative bibliography. So one thought I actually had was we take these readings and just clean them up like a narrative bibliography and send it out as an email newsletter and post it as a page on the website where anybody who wants to like follow the trail of readings of this season, they can do so. So not as much of a heavy lift as we did with the online governance paper, and not even as much of a lift as we briefly thought we would do, which was build a map and a lexicon, which I think, yeah, we abandoned the idea after like one half-hearted false start. But I think just doing a narrative bibliography is within the scope of effort. So maybe one of these upcoming sessions, we'll just sort of like collectively do that. Um, let's see. Yeah. For the coming season, so I guess we're starting on October 31st, and it looks like it's going to be just 9 sessions, but maybe we should sort of extend that out and end this next season like somewhere in January, just to get us like 10 or 12 sessions. Yeah, I thought one of the things we could do is like narrow the focus back down to doing blockchain stuff again a little bit for a while, since a lot seems to have happened. So do more sessions on blockchain stuff, maybe even like one or two hands-on sessions. And the other thing I thought was on the social side, again, looking for a topic that's in between online governance and like technical distributed systems. This is why I suggested red teaming. So I tagged Nathan on that because he brought up the pickpocket thing at some point. But yeah, if we can find readings that are related to red teaming and just in general how to develop and discipline sort of a mindset of thinking about adversarial attacks and things like that. So that's kind of like a social / technical topic. So that might be interesting to do. So those are the two topics I had in mind. So again, narrower blockchain and more red teaming. What I'd like to do, since we've gone through our list, is if we could take another maybe 8 minutes and do a little bit of search for some articles. So if you can find at least one article that you think would be a good candidate for the next cycle, either within the scopes I mentioned or beyond, if you think a different theme would be interesting. So find one article to bring up just to make it concrete what the agenda could be, and post it in the distributed systems channel. I'll compile later and make an agenda. But the reason to do this is this time I think it might be interesting if we actually lay out the full agenda beforehand and publish it. And that might attract more people and sort of broaden the discussion a little bit. So I'd like to at least make an attempt to publish the whole agenda sort of in advance for this next cycle. And this might also help the point Nathan was bringing up, which is if you need more time to read the deeper articles, already, I think you brought it up last time, Nathan, and I started posting the readings the night before. And generally, I think I was able to do that. But yeah, maybe the night before is not enough, and having kind of the whole syllabus for the season out might be better. So anyway, so that's my thought. So why don't we take 8 minutes to find at least one, but if you find more than one, that's good. Link that might be a candidate and post it in the distributed systems channel, not in voice meta.
Can I suggest that we talk about something before we do that? And there's been a question, what is the difference between the distributed systems chat and the online governance chat? I think if we clarify that, it could help us put together our agenda.
Okay, yeah. So let's leave the floor open for like 5 minutes for additional questions on Teams and stuff, and I'll speak briefly to the distinction between the two. I don't think there's a strong one. So Sachin and Brian have been sort of curating the online governance thing, and I've been curating this one. And yeah, there is a significant overlap. But I think in the last couple of cycles, online governance has drifted even more strongly social to the point that it's like almost anthropological. So like, case studies of like guerrilla movements. Last week we read a summary of a history book. So it's getting much more strongly humanities and social sciences, which I think is a good direction because that kind of leaves the territory of quasi-technical social systems open for the Monday call. But yeah, floor open for other thematic comments.
I have a really dumb question. I apologize. Probably I missed the chat when it happened, but why exactly we abandoned the idea of doing a lexicon?
I mean, we tried one session. I think I led one exercise in coming up with, I forget what it was. Oh yeah, we did that, one of the axes for which to draw the map. But then I lost momentum to continue leading the effort. So I think it just fell apart. Like somebody has to lead it, and I was doing too many things at the time. And yeah, for the next cycle too, I think I'll be too uh, busy to lead this one as well, since I'm trying to do stuff on a couple of other fronts as well. So yeah, if somebody else wants to lead this and pull something together, something by that I mean something more ambitious than just like a annotated bibliography page. Yeah, I'm all for it. I'll participate and contribute, but yeah, I don't have the bandwidth to actually lead.
So I'd like to suggest perhaps a way which could solve that. Maybe if we had a series of at each meeting we talk about one or two different organizations and how they do distributed, and then at the end of that meeting we put it somewhere on the map, probably more like pin the tail on the donkey, so we don't have to organize a map ahead of time, because we do a deep dive into each one of these enterprises, like Hire, or I forget some other companies that we've talked about, that tomato company. And as time evolves, we identify the dimensions that are interesting, and that's how we build the map without having somebody in charge. The only thing we need is for people to commit to bring to the table an article which describes an organization with some level of distributed behavior. But I agree with Goy that the map thing kind of got lost and would have been super interesting.
So yeah, I'm willing to participate in any design for like a very low overhead way to try and do this. But just sort of like, I guess, cautionary warning, since I've sort of led enough of these things, I don't think you can get it down to zero. there's always sort of a non-trivial centralized startup effort, and more importantly, a non-trivial centralized finish effort. Like every project we've done, somebody has taken on the task of like doing a certain minimum amount of coordination to get things going, and then towards the end, a slightly larger amount of coordination to turn it into something presentable as a finished product. So the bookend centralized coordination efforts can't be driven to zero, but yeah, I'm all for seeing how low we can drive it. Anurag seems to have posted something about annotated reading tool or something. So yeah, if somebody wants to like take the lead on trying to use one of these low effort tools, let's try it. But okay, any other comments? All right, so let's take let's say 8 minutes to basically Google. So pick up on like keywords and themes that are sort of on your mind. Do some Googling, see if you can find some interesting articles, post one or two, and then we'll come back in 8 to 10 minutes, and then maybe everybody can like briefly speak to what they found. All right, so 8 to 10 minutes search time starts now. And post in distributed systems, not in voice meta, since we want to capture it later. All right, 1 more minute. Please post at least one link.
Where are we posting it?
All right, can we quickly go around again, starting with Anuraj, briefly sort of speak to what you searched for, what themes, and introduce what you found?
Well, I mostly searched about the history of Bitcoin, so I posted a paper regarding its like the academic concepts that went into the creation of Bitcoin itself. So basically it's a summary of all the concepts that are used starting from 1980. Next is Ben.
Yeah, so I started looking for red team stuff because that's what I was interested in. And I stumbled upon the Red Team Handbook, published by the University of Foreign Military and Cultural Studies, which is, I think, a branch of the Army. And I've just been poking through it. I don't know. As someone with academic background, I find military scholarship fascinating because I sort of think that they're evil twins of each other. But there's a bunch of stuff like there seems to be some like various games for red teaming, tools, techniques. It also feels almost like a introductory. I mean, that's just mostly some skimming of it. It feels like introductory business school stuff. But I can see how this would be part of a course to try to red team in the military sense of trying to get to think like your enemies. So I don't know. I put this up there because I found poking through this document or this book even handbook fascinating. I'm not sure what we could do with it if anything.
I was thinking about again myself, and I probably need an update on what's going on in chaos engineering field because it's a pretty old idea, and people are carrying around the same case studies from Netflix and stuff. I found one article about it, but frankly, I will still be looking for something like what is the state of chaos engineering in 2020, in autumn 2020. Meyer?
Yeah. So I posted an article about releasing change. And the reason why I think this could be the basis for, let's call it a syllabus, is because it's a different way of looking at how do you control an organization. And the control here is by releasing little dams to allow water to flow instead of telling it where to go. So I think that's in line, even though this is about organizations which are top down, I think it's definitely in line with the needs of distributed organizations. I also posted an article, Alfano, about more universals, and the reason why that's interesting is because there's a database out there with 200 and something different societies where you define what they consider to be moral in the sense of give and take, what kind of activities are allowed and which ones are not allowed. And in distributed organizations, we have a big problem that different people have different moralities, but they're also not aware of what other people might consider to be moral. And last but not least, I'm really intrigued by this promptness of DALI and DALI 2 and Midjourney. And since we're going to be talking to AIs using prompts, I can definitely imagine AIs talking to us using prompts. So I'm just wondering if we can preempt all of that and try to figure out what an organization which only communicates using prompts looks like. Okay, it's a type of distributed organization, but there's no articles or publications on it yet, so I don't know if it's relevant. Nathan, next.
So I had just started going through my big list of bookmarked articles to see if there was anything particularly around red teaming and adversarial thinking that might be applicable. A lot of what I wound up finding in that list is surprisingly maybe a little too narrow in scope. A lot of things about breaking into exchange and whatnot. But one interesting thing that I did post to the channel that I've been meaning to read is an article from Ars Technica looking at actually just sort of the absolute mediocrity in the ransomware scene. And I think this is something that, when thinking about adversarially, we tend to steelman our adversaries a lot, and there's just as much, if not more, mediocrity in the criminal world as in the non-criminal world. And I think it's an interesting thing to think about when considering adversarial, these sort of adversarial things. Like, you're not necessarily guarding against the top of the line attacker. Most of your attackers are just as mediocre as you are. So I think that was potentially an interesting perspective to bring to it. So, and then I think next is Shrita. I noticed you actually posted a link. Did you want to talk?
Yeah. I think I was listening to Venkat's trip report last week, and I've been seeing like people in my sphere talk a lot about zero knowledge proofs, and I only have like a very top level sense of what they are, but I see Vitalik always talking about ZK Starks. So I was just like Googling and trying to find something at the right level of abstraction that maybe I could understand, because a lot of it is very difficult math. So this was the best attempt that I had. Passing it back to Venkat.
All right. So I've been sort of looking for the last week or so, and I added a couple to the list already. One of them is actually the Red Team manual that Ben mentioned. I think it's been renamed the Critical Thinking Manual now or something. I don't know why. But yeah, the one I posted today is this classic article called On Cooling the Mark Out. So it's from 1945 or something. We may have already read it in online governance, I'm not sure. But it's a classic article on how con artists basically manage the psychology of the mark when they're like trying to steal something from them, which is basically when Okay, I won't sort of talk about the article itself. It's a really fun article that I think is a good anchor read for red teaming. So that's the one I had. Yeah, looks like we have a bunch of good ones here. So maybe we can take 15, 20 minutes next week to try and do a little bit more organizing. I think it'll take a couple more stabs at this before we get a meaningful syllabus. So I'll get us started by at least putting all this in like an unsorted hopper on the Rome page, and then we can take a stab at like doing something with it. All right, so that's all I had. Any other further thoughts and comments?
Um, we have a kind of tension between wanting each meeting, each chat to stand on its own because not everybody makes it to every chat, and our desire to have some sort of chain or journey, like Google calls it now. How are we thinking of resolving this conflict?
Yeah, good question. I think we have like one successful example of kind of doing that with the Lamport series in the last season. I think the papers were relatively standalone, but those who attended more than one kind of got a sense of like Lamport's overall trajectory and contribution. So I don't know. I think we just need more practice at doing this. It's not like a structural or process thing. I think you actually have to do it with specific sequences of content to get it right. But I can already see some through lines here that if we arrange them in the right sequence, maybe it'll work out. So yeah, this will be a good test of our ability to do that and actually doing the syllabus ahead of time. Maybe sequencing in order of like difficulty for each track. That'll be a way to do it.
So if I can rephrase what you're saying, unlike the prompt school experiment, where every week we have a prompt and people answer it, here we want to do a sparse lecture series, I'll call it, or sparse discussion series, which we want to invite other people to join with the understanding that the more they join, the more they get. But even if they join less, they still get. But it's some sort of course, just like prompt score, just a completely different type.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And the metaphor I was reaching for was a good TV show that's mainly episodic in structure, but sometimes has like long arcs where there's a longer story playing out bit by bit over episodes. So,
Like the
yeah.
original Star Trek.
Yeah. So, yeah, let's try and script that and publish the agenda beforehand and see how it works.
No, because they say that Joss Whedon, I'm sure he's not the first one, but when he did Buffy the Vampire Slayer, one of the things he did was he mixed together a per episode arc and a season arc. So what you're saying is we have two arcs, per episode and per season.
Yep. So that'll be interesting to try and wrangle. So yeah, I think we did a reasonable job last time with the two tracks of social and technical, with some structure to at least the technical side. The social one was kind of more random one-offs. But this time we have some structure, possible structure to both the social and the technical side. So if we do end up with like red teaming as the social angle, and then the technical might be a little bit more again back on blockchain, I think we could impose some structure. Let's see. Okay, yeah, let's spend 15 minutes each in the next couple of sessions trying to do this. And then by the third session, we'll publish it. But let's not hold up the readings while doing that, because I do think the highlight is actually reading an article each week. And that's what I find fun, at least. So, all right. Any other closing thoughts?
Just one is that one of the ways to tie it all together is, yes, these are prompts and people say what they feel, but if we are able to define questions ahead of time that should always be answered, that helps tie everything together into a cohesive whole.
Yep, that's a thought. So if you can tie it into the mapping type exercise you suggested, that would be an example of that kind of question, like classifying a case study on a map. So I don't know that we can like get a non-vacuous question that applies to 100% of the readings, but I think we can get a non-vacuous one that applies to 80% of the readings. So that might work out. All right. So see you guys next week, and we'll get started on the new season and organizing it at the same time. See you guys.